I was 13 years old when this happened, and this story still gives me goosebumps years later. My family and I were all about the holidays. They took the decorations very seriously, and people would always compliment our house when it came to our decorations. Our neighborhood was fairly wealthy and pretty quiet, but when the holidays came around, everyone was full of spirit. In our backyard, we had props full of all different types of characters, such as skeletons, witches, scarecrows, mummies, and various types of inflatables. It used to spook me out growing up, always thinking something was going to jump out at me, but eventually I got used to it. Well, on this Halloween day, it was a Tuesday, so everyone came with their costumes on and eagerly waiting for the day to end so we could all go trick-or-treating and have a blast with our friends. The day finally ended, and me and 3 other friends stopped by at my house to eat and gather all of our belongings before we headed out for the rest of the evening. My mom noticed that some of the decorations on the inside of the house had been moved, and she pulled me aside and told me to tell my friends not to touch anything else inside the house, and I could tell that she was annoyed. I told her I doubt anyone has touched anything because we were mostly in my room, but I brushed it off and went back with my friends. So, it was about 5 p.m. when we started trick-or-treating. Everything went smoothly. There was hundreds of kids outside, all dressed in their costumes, and plenty of families greeting kids at the door, giving away candy. About 3 hours in, my 3 friends and I began to get really tired, and we could tell the houses were slowing down, and most people had 1 or 2 buckets full already. Eventually, we all agreed to go home since we had school the next day, and I told them they could come over tomorrow to sort out all of our candy. When I got home, I quickly took off my nurse costume and was looking so forward to just laying in bed. About 30 minutes in, I hear the bathroom light flicker on. It was weird because my sister had slept over at her friend's house, and my parents never usually used that bathroom. I tried not to overthink it, and I was on the verge of falling asleep already. Until 1 hour later, I heard a knock on my window. This is when my heart sank to my stomach, and I began to take it more seriously. I tiptoed to the window, opened the curtains, and there it was. I remember every detail. It was a very tall man, dressed in a ghost face costume, standing in my backyard, looking up at the window. He blended in perfectly with the props. I saw a weapon in his hand, which looked to be a knife. I knew it couldn't have been any of my friends. This guy was at least 6'5", and none of my friends were dressed up as a ghost face. It took everything in my power not for me to scream, but I ran to my mom's room and aggressively woke her up, saying someone was in our backyard with a knife. My dad went to my window, and he saw the guy doing something to my front door. My mom called the cops, and about 10 minutes later, they arrived. But of course, he was already gone, and no way to identify the man. But he did leave footprints in the backyard, leading to a trail. There was nothing the cops could do, but everything that happened before started to catch up to me. My mom was freaked out because he was probably the one moving stuff inside the house earlier in the day. And the only other reason for the bathroom light flicking on that night, we're not sure how he got into the house. Most likely in the evening, when we had all those props set up outside and left the door open throughout the day for Halloween. Who knows what his intentions were, or how long he was there. To this day, Halloween has never been the same for me and my family. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. But it was Halloween weekend. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night on October 30th, I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swinging back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown covered in blood and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I was finally able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a bad dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way, trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing there." I have never seen a look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman had turned around and stared at the both of us and slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed the knife, and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later, trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I have never slept in my living room again. This took place a while ago. I was 13, and my family had just moved to a new town. A new friend of mine from school and I made plans to go trick-or-treating together. At the time, I remember thinking I was a bit too old to still be trick-or-treating, but who doesn't want free candy? My friend and I figured we'd still had one more year of trick-or-treating left in us. Because we were 13 and lived in a fairly safe neighborhood, my parents thought it was fine for us to go trick-or-treating together without adult supervision. Everything was going great, and we were having fun, getting solid candy, the usual. Then, we rang one guy's doorbell. The porch light was on. There was a pumpkin or two, so we figured the people in the house were likely to be handing out candy. A middle-aged man opened the door. At first, I was glad because he was dressed in a costume and happy to see my friend and I, so I felt we were in for some top-tier candy. I don't even remember what candy he handed out, but I do remember what happened next. He asked us to enter in his home, which is weird, but we were 13, so we didn't really think anything of it. Then, he asked if we could take our photo. He said he always liked to take photos of the kids every Halloween because he loved seeing the costumes. On one of his walls were a bunch of pictures of different random unrelated children in Halloween costumes. At this point, even being a dumb 13-year-old, I was starting to get kinda creeped out. But I figured it was best not to upset the man and let him take the picture, and then we could just leave. So, he snaps the photo of us, and then he pulls out a clipboard with a sheet of paper on it with a bunch of names written in childish handwriting. He says he likes the kids, whose pictures he takes, to write their names so he can know who they are. At this point, we were both mega creeped out. We should have just ran away, but we were too conditioned not to be rude. I decided to sign a fake name. He looked at the paper, looked back up at me, then down at the paper again. Then he repeated the name I'd given, Hunter Gibson, and nodded his head. Luckily after that, he didn't do anything, and we were free to leave, but it definitely creeped us both out. That wall was just so weird with all those pictures. It just looked so inhumane. At the time, I thought he was just an eccentric guy. But as an adult, looking back on the story, it seems much more sinister. I'm so glad nothing bad happened to us, and hope nothing bad happened to any other kids. Halloween, with all these costume kids trick-or-treating in the dark and minimal parent supervision, could be a great opportunity for predators to get kids alone in their homes with no one knowing the kids' whereabouts. Please stay safe out there, and happy Halloween.